So you may need to unmute you, Ganesh.
Suresh?
Yeah, sure. I guess we got about 80 people already, Ganesh, so I think people are joining in, but I think we will start.
Yes.
Great. So with that, let's start. And good evening and a warm welcome to CFI's panel discussion on coaching for executive transitions. Transition coaching is one of the interventions widely used to support transitioning leaders. The panel discussion will throw light on the importance, role, and the effectiveness of coaching for executive transitions as a means of supporting leaders in transitioning into their new roles seamlessly and effectively. It is my privilege and honor to introduce the distinguished panelists this evening. Ashok Ramchandran, Group Executive President, Human Resources at Aditya Birla Group. Ashok has been with the Aditya Group since 2009 and has over 3 decades of working experience. He's worked earlier with Tata Life, GE, and Asian Paints in various leadership roles. A product of Loyola College and XLRI, Ashok truly believes in helping people succeed and in facilitating people to achieve super heights of professional and personal achievements. Ashok has been honored by Business World Awards as the CHR of the Year in the year 2017. Ayashkant Sarangi is our next panelist. He's the Chief Human Resources Officer at Wipro Enterprises. Ashok has over 2 decades of industry experience, having played various roles in HR with increasing leadership responsibilities in Wipro, GE, Infosys, and L&T. Ayashkant is a graduate from NIT Surat and from the Xavier Institute of Management. In addition, he is also a mentor advisor to a couple of startups, the turbohire.com and justdropyourresume.com. Our third panelist is Oscar Braganza, business and CEO coach. After spending 21 years of experience as CEO in India and overseas, Oscar retired in 2012 to start his coaching career, joining CFI's coach certification program. Oscar's coaching experience has included leaders from a wide range of companies across FMCG, IT, travel, hospitality, manufacturing, and the insurance sectors. Over the last decade, Oscar has completed over 60 coaching engagements. Moderating this session is Ganesh Chella, co-founder and managing director of CFI, a destination for coaching-led leader development solution and coach education and certification. Ganesh has been personally involved in the certification of over 270 executive coaches and training over 700 managers and leaders as internal coaches. He has guided and supervised hundreds of coaching assignments, and thanks to that, he has deep insights into what shapes leaders and makes them effective. Thank you all once again for joining in. And with this, I would like to hand over the rest of the session to the safe hands of Ganesh Chella. Over to you, Ganesh.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh. Delighted to meet all of you friends for the grand finale of our CPDP for this year. And wonderful to see so many of our coaches, our clients, the HR community present here. Today is about transition coaching. As all of us realize, transitions are becoming very real, not just for individuals, but also for organizations. We also recognize that it holds a lot of promise, but also perils. And therefore, I'm delighted to be able to engage with our panelists today on the subject of what transitions really mean in the careers of people, what it means to organizations, what's at stake, and what is the role that coaching can do, how can we get it right, and how can we help more and more organizations recognize the power of transition coaching. So I'm going to get started right away by asking our panelists to first take a minute and share their first-hand experience of the most toughest transition they ever had to make in their career. Ashok, I'm going to start off with you by asking you, what was the most difficult transition you had to make in your career, and what was it like?
Thanks, Ganesh. Thank you and the CFI community for inviting us on this panel. A pleasure being here today and sharing a few thoughts. I see a lot of friends on the participants list as well, who are very seasoned coaches and industry friends. So warm welcome to everybody. And I really hope at the end of this hour and something, we add some value to the whole conversation. So do chip in with questions, comments, and so on, so that we together create insightful chat for the day. I don't think the panel alone has all the answers. No? So by the way, that's my point of view. So Ganesh, I think this is a topic which has been around. It's become more prominent now for two reasons. And I'll quickly mention that and come back to where I experienced it for myself as a person. I think the context today has become more complex. The world outside into which you get recruited or you transit into new roles within the organization has become more complex. Complex because the uncertainty levels are higher, information velocity is far higher, therefore the need to be prepared seems to be far higher. Second is the phenomenon that people are getting bigger roles faster, and therefore, how do I call it? There is a hurried arrival of the unprepared. Which quite often happens to roles, you know. So I want the next role and I'm ready to get it, and I get it, and I then struggle to succeed in that. So at one level, the roles have become complex. The other level, the preparation is faster than expected. So that bridge for me is very critical to get done through this logic of transition management. I think early days when I moved careers from Asian Paints, first time I came into corporate HR, from manufacturing kind of a setup, I walked in assuming things will be fine. And I think I underestimated the deltas. I underestimated what I carried to the table and what the new role demanded. And therefore, it could have been a sign of confidence or it could have been a sign of not thought through. And therefore, for the first 6 months, I must say I went through a process of having to learn, relearn, unlearn, learned my lessons as I went along, stumbled and learned. Gave me, I think I stumbled and I managed. No? I managed. But to say that that's the best way to do may not have been the right thing. So I wish I had better support at that moment when I was a little more greener in the gills, and therefore I needed that air cover to help. And I think that made me thoughtful about transitions. And over time, that was about 20 years back. Over time, I've become more conscious that, hey, this is a very critical phase in anybody's career and life. I want to succeed. The organization wants me to succeed. And yet there is a gap. So how does that bridge the gap became, in my mind, transition management as a big subject. So this is a very, how do we call it? It's a very close to heart topic, if I may call it, which has affected me and it works for me. I'll stop there, Ganesh.
Thanks, Ashok. Thanks for that. And you're fortunate that it happened early in your career, right?
Indeed.
Ayaskanth, I want to bring you in and ask you what was in your life a tough transition from a career point of view?
Sure. First and foremost, thank you, Ganesh and CFI for the warm invite, and hi everyone. Absolute pleasure being here. Let me talk about my fears a bit, Ganesh. Right? And I think finally that's what hassles all of us, especially when we have to either move roles. And I had most of my fear when after almost like a 11-year stint, I had to move into Wipro to head the BPO division from an HR perspective. I'm so sorry. So 3 things that kind of bothered me at that point in time, and it kind of stayed with me almost 3 or 4 months. The first was the industry itself. In GE, I was exposed to a brick and mortar kind of an industry and multiple industries, whereas kind of getting into BPO as an industry and really trying to understand what that made me understand, right? I didn't understand how billing happens, how we generate revenue from our clients, so on and so forth. That was one big fear. The second big fear was the loss of network I had in GE, right? Because here I had to kind of build my trust all over again with teams, with peers, with bosses, and it wasn't easy. But why should somebody generally trust me because I've got into a certain position? Right? I think so. How do I really go about building my own credibility? Was the second big fear I had, and the third important fear I had was I won't say self-doubt, but more on myself, assuming am I getting compared with my predecessor, right? And what are other people thinking about? Right? So those kind of deep down felt as question marks in my mind, right? And I kind of, therefore, as Ashok was talking about, kind of went through my journey, failed a few times, succeeded a few times, learned things the hard way. But on reflection, I really wish I had somebody to handhold me through that process, especially senior levels when you're quite, you're expected to do everything. The expectations from the organization doesn't change. And then
Right.
still you have to kind of navigate through it and get things delivered. Yeah, so
Right.
that's what I would kind of capture as my experience.
Very, very able to connect with what you're saying. And thanks for saying it from your heart. Oscar, what was it for you? You're muted. Yeah.
Okay. So Ganesh, thanks for giving me this opportunity, and great to be back in the middle of so many coaches and so many corporate leaders. So I'm going to talk about, I've got a lot of mileage on me, so I'm going to talk about a transition episode which happened in my last corporate job, which was in 2008. And the broad headline that I would like to put out to everybody is getting to grips with the new reality. And, if I were to put it as that was the essence of it. And I was moving from a large group, the RPG group, which is a sound leadership group. It had promoters who were leading, but they were not hands-on or micromanaging. You had a structure which was there of very senior corporate leaders who were professional in their own right. There was a culture, there were norms, processes, et cetera, et cetera. I was moving into an environment which I thought was quite exciting before I actually got in there, and it turned out to be exciting later. But the negotiating it was the difficult part of it. I was reporting into a first-generation entrepreneur who had huge dreams of moving the company from 400 crores to 2,000 crores. We got to 1,400, but in the space of 4 or 5 years. But that was the kind of essence of growth. So it came with all the issues related to growth. So first was getting completely aligned with the way the new promoter thought. And it was not just the business alignment, which was that. It was culture, the fact that your time and my time is the same. If I work late, that you work late. If I take a holiday, you take a holiday. If I have breakfast meetings, then you have breakfast meetings. So getting used to this aspect of your time is my time. So that was one part of it. The other part of it was this huge thing about loyalists within the company, people who had seen him grow from a 10 crore business and had seen him, sit on a charpoy, get stuff done. And he was well educated, don't get me wrong. And to this beginning of this new influx of people coming in. And I was the first among the many who came in, and I brought in many others who came in. So how to get work out of and get to be working and comfortable with a set of loyalists who believed that their first allegiance was to the promoter and then to me, the CEO, who was coming in on board. And that was a process of how to do it. Maybe I'll talk about it later. So that was a process. The third process was getting used to this no frills organization. And of course, a lot has changed, but it was no frills. So while you had the money to buy a great car, you went and did it yourself. While you had the money to get a great house, you went and did it yourself. So there was no backup support to help you get organized with anything. You did it yourself. You took out time, you went out late into the night, you did what it was. So that was a whole new ballgame. And just to keep it short, I'll talk about this little difference in the socio-cultural, economic aspect of the people that you were working with. They were dramatically different from the kind of people that I had worked with in the RPG group, and before that in MRF and Philips and so on. And getting used to that and getting adjusted to that and building relationships with that was, so all of it hit me in one time. The time, the reality, the speed, the capture of the whole dynamism of this promoter and what he expected to, it all hit me at the same time. And it took me 3 to 4 months to kind of sort myself out. I can't say I really sorted myself out, but I began to feel that I was beginning to be in control. And if at that time I had a transition coach, maybe I'd have done it faster. But a year later, I felt like I was there. It was something that I had grown up with, and the old days of the earlier company seemed like a distant memory. So that really was it, getting in touch and getting to grips with the reality. And there were different dimensions of this reality that one had to get to grips with.
Right. Wonderful. Thanks. That's a very different dimension. Before I move on, I must share what it was. My tough transition was when I stopped reporting to an HR boss and started reporting to a line boss. HR bosses are nice, they understand you, they speak your language, you're all talking of cool HR stuff. And when I first reported to the line boss, he said, yeah, I don't care all about your mumbo jumbo. This is what I want to get done. You know? So that was a rude shock, saying, how come he just doesn't get what I like? You know, and so that was a tough one. And it took me a long time but I was richer by that experience, but I could certainly have done the transition better. So we'll now move on, but I want to say that if you have any questions, do put it into the chat box. You are in the able hands of Bridge, our own senior coach, who will kind of figure out how to bring them up and kind of share them with the panelists at the right time. Thanks, Bridge, for doing that. I want us to now get into the shoes of first anyone who's in leadership today. And then add to it the challenge of transition and say, what is really the source of stress for any leader, right? What are the sources of pressure for a leader today? And then add to it, what are the sources of pressure for someone who's making a transition? What really concerns someone who's been successful when they've been told that now you're going to do this, right? So I'm going to start with you, Ayushkant, to talk about what is concerning leaders today in general, and specifically for someone who's just made a move, what are the added pressures and concerns?
So Ganesh, great question. And I would kind of bucket them into two parts. One is a role transition happening because of somebody joining from another company externally into your organization. The second one is more internal, somebody moving from role A to role B within large corporate. In our experience, we have seen 3 or 4 key challenges. First is we have seen a lot of leaders underestimating the complexity that is there in front of them, right? Especially when you keep doing a role for a fairly long time and you are successful at it. You develop the knack of anticipating and looking around corners, which is so critical for success, especially at senior levels. So the fact that, you know, one doesn't is into a role blind, kind of assumes that what worked for me in the past is now going to work for me from a style perspective. Right? A lot of people underestimate that, and that is a big challenge, right? And that gets reflected even if you kind of look at most CEOs who tell you that their biggest challenge is developing leaders from within. Because if the system would have been so robust, this comment wouldn't even be coming from anybody. Right? That's point number one. Point number two that we are seeing is the whole aspect of this with time changing, work itself is becoming much more complex than what it was. Right? I mean, just imagine the type of transition we all underwent as a society in itself due to COVID. Right? The work style itself underwent a change. People who were comfortable with a command and control style of management have to suddenly use a remote style, and people are not sitting in front of them to kind of just walk up to that person's desk and get things done. Right. So that itself, the work environment itself has its own set of challenges, and the same one can extend, say, even for technology. Right? That itself is changing how people are interacting and having dialogues. The third and last important thing is, what is the organization doing to support transition? I think that's the other important area that's there. And quite frankly, this is an area which is a big vacuum, I would say, at this point in time, where people are assuming that this is going to work, but there is nobody to help support in that journey, right? And especially for a person who is at the center of it, it does impact the self-confidence of the person, because the person who's been placed into a bigger role obviously has been successful in the past. And in fact, we had once done an analytics to see that typically you're a consistent performer. Then you move into a bigger role, and then you do not end up getting the same quality of ratings, the same type of feedback, the same compensation increase. And that plays on minds of people that am I successful? Am I relevant? So that whole emotional aspect of an individual, that's the other important piece, which is very, very critical. And that piece, in my view, has to be nurtured because that's so unique to every individual. So those are some of our experience that we have seen in terms of
Excellent, excellent. That's really the whole thing about the fact that performance dips sometimes, right? From what was great or what people thought was fantastic potential is taking a dip, and maybe people are still underestimating it. So I want to pick up from there, Ashok, and ask you to build on this very point that on one hand, when the moment the person is anointed, so to speak, it seems to feel great. And are we therefore setting people up for even ignoring the challenges? I mean, what's going on in that person's mind that you're setting him up and saying you're the chosen one? So does it set people up to say, no, I can do it? And the emotions involved internally. I mean, you must have seen dozens of leaders or had conversations with them. Tell us, how does it happen?
No, this is at the crux of the whole issue. So if I look at, I want to add to what Ayushkant was saying. I think if I look at what CEOs are expecting today, heads of organizations, and therefore, when you hire somebody from outside or when you move somebody up from within, and therefore you herald in what is called a transition or a bigger role or a newer role, what do our CEOs expect from anybody? It need not be newcomer. It could be all of us in the current roles as well. Broadly speaking, the CEO is in a hurry to show results. Okay, so you want results, you are under pressure to deliver. And I think the, tolerance for non-performance is going down. Risk of delivery is higher. Therefore, the CEO is also under pressure to say, I need results. So whoever I'm appointing internally or externally needs to show me results. Second, there is a velocity to succeed. I can't say I'll come, settle down over a period of time, I will do well. And, it's a long term, my life is long term. So 2 years from now, I'll succeed. Nobody has the time. Everybody wants speed to succeed. So there are milestones apparently to what a newcomer must hit in the new role. And that is unsaid falling on you. Third is this more amorphous thing called culture fit. Does he or she fit our culture? Now, this is starting to really grip a lot of things. Yeah, he's a bright fellow, but doesn't fit our culture. Competent, but doesn't fit our culture. Will he be effective in our context and culture? Now, every company is very proud of what they are, who they are, culture, etc. And we make quite a meal out of this word called culture. So obviously, there is something around this amorphous thing called culture, which my CEO would come and say, yeah, candidate was good, but will he fit our culture? Now, that is when we get into a muddled debate about what life is all about. The fourth aspect I see leaders, CEOs asking for is a mix, which is, can a newcomer, likely external newcomer, appreciate our heritage and my context, while at the same time transform me? I don't want him to come and do what I'm doing. I want him to understand what I'm doing and yet transform. And this word transform is on everybody's lips. Huh? Transform, modify, change, grow, etc. I'm doing well, but I want the newcomer to bring in fresh thinking. My culture may not allow me to do that, but I want you to do that. So the whole lot of these complexities come into this. Appreciate heritage, but transform. And therefore, what I sense happens, Ganesh, to newcomers is, it's a very odd thing. I've seen many of our people do that. At the interview level, at the aspiration level, the person is a confident cookie. Okay. I don't care. I belong to another company. I'm applying to you. I'm confident. I'm coming across. I'm putting my best foot forward. I come across as the most confident person you've ever met. Equally, internally, everybody says, I'm ready for the next role and give me more, give me larger role. So it's highly confident aspirant. The moment you give the role, uncertain inductee. Because then the whole pressure of your equity that you built in the earlier company is gone, and you're having to do what Ayushkant said, starting from the beginning. And then the same confident interviewee becomes an uncertain employee to start with. Say, hey, I need to succeed. Am I doing right? I need validation. Am I doing okay? Am I being judged? Something happens in the middle. And I think how soon we can help address that anxiety is, I think, the CEOs asks of people like me. Say, guys, recruitment is no more a brave act. Can you get the person to succeed sooner than later? Because we're paying serious money for senior hiring. It's return on investments, not from a CTC point of view, but from results point of view. And if I'm bumbling around with it, what is the role of HR in helping somebody succeed? So I think it has now come to, am I helping my newcomer / promotee succeed? And how soon am I doing it? So that's my ask I hear from my leaders. That's the pressure I get under from my CEOs. So just adding to what Ayushkant said.
Right. So the picture that, in a sense, I'm getting is that it's almost an extreme, impossible ask we are placing on the person. That the means are important, ends are important, it must happen now, we can't wait, and you must do it even better than before.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ganesh, adding to what, sorry to interrupt, adding to what you're saying, I think more and more companies, other than a specialist role, are expecting diverse hiring to happen. So in cement, I don't want everybody from cement. In financial services, I don't want everybody from financial services. So that adds another complexity, because by definition, you're looking for diverse population. Diverse, not just gender, right? Diverse in a profile.
Right.
That adds another layer.
Right.
The punt at the time of hiring needs to come true once somebody joins. So I think that's an interesting conundrum as I see it. Sorry, interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, and at one level, most leaders I speak to say, I've been brought in to usher in change. And then we are saying, why don't you understand heritage and culture? I mean, there are so many contradictions that are going on. So, Oscar, I want you to speak from the voice of a coachee that you meet, who hopefully had the benefit of getting help at that golden moment that Ashok painted so nicely. You know, it is just at that golden moment where he's no longer cocky and confident. He's beginning to say, hey, maybe I could do with some help. And we'll come back to that. But, you know, play a video about what the coachee is telling you when he meets you, when he has you by his side.
Great question. First of all, I think I endorse everything that Ayushkant and Ashok said. I think they painted the picture, beautifully, coming at it from an organization perspective. And my perspective is not really very different when I talk to coaches that I have worked with across organizations. I'll just talk a little bit about areas that seem to come to me, and I'm speaking from my personal experience as a coach, which may not be true for other coaches or from the personal experience of companies that I worked with.
Right.
So let me talk about that. The first one I would put under the broad bucket of managing self. How anxious am I as I move in? And when I suddenly discover that things are a little more difficult, more complex than I thought them to be, that what I used to do in my old company doesn't really work here. And you get strange examples. I just ask these guys why it wasn't done, and they think I'm being nasty with them, and my tone of voice is different. So it starts to boil down to this anxiety that I have within me as to how much time do I have also. So understanding this anxiety, this need to actually achieve, and then trying to prioritize how much time do I really have? And the answer is actually shades of gray, because on some things you don't have much time. On some things you have a fair bit of time, and on something, and the choice the leader has to make, and the choice that I find I help them work with, is what do you have time on and what don't you have time on? And I want to talk a little bit about that in a bit. And when we start to talk about it, we start to talk about what is it that you don't have time to really do. So what we don't have time, from my understanding I've seen, is the need to understand the people the culture, and the business many levels below what may be the obvious one. And we call it in coaching terms, peeling the onion and looking at the story behind the story and all of that. But understanding the business, the people, and the culture far more deeply. Why are we doing, or why are people doing things the way they are doing? Why is my approach, which was so successful in early companies, not really working today? And one of the things that seems to come up from the coaches once we talk and go deeper is to say, hey, I haven't yet built a strong trust-based relationship with key players. Some people may not have even identified who are the key players. Some people may not have even identified what's the key dynamic in the organization. And if I've been unable to identify the key dynamic, the key players, the key direction in which power flows, the key ways in which things get done, and I haven't built a trust relationship with a large number of people, I'm going to be under pressure. So one of the first things that someone does not have much time to do is this aspect, understanding people, the culture, and beginning to make strong trust-based relationships. And sometimes the thing in the mind, and this happens particularly with extremely logical people, why do I have to do it? I mean, it's all cut and dried. The number is here, this is there, this is there. And I mean, we've told it, this is the way the outcome is. But sometimes building these relationships at a very early day and building them in a strong trust-based way sometimes eases the pain and sometimes eases the path forward. So if you were to ask me, what is it that cannot wait? This has to be done right. That cannot wait. It has to be done right now. And every action within your right from your first day, putting aside, parking your anxiety on one side, every action has to be built on going deeper and deeper into this whole aspect of what's really the business problem, who are the people there, what's the culture, why is it the way it is, and why is what I used to do not working? What do I need to do to change? What do I need to do to reach out to the system? Because the system won't reach out to me. I've got to do something to reach out to the system. So that Ganesh in brief is what I find a lot of my coaches talk to me about. And this I find transcends levels, whether you're talking about high flyers, whether you're talking about CXOs and CEOs, or whether you're talking about group level positions. I find it kind of, or I do work with entrepreneurs. It seems to, a lot of this transcends levels, people and types. The nuances in the detail.
Right. So fairly, I think we're getting down deeper and deeper into the complexity of the human side of transition, which is really what we are here talking about. So the vulnerabilities are beginning to actually show up. Maybe this is a time bridge for you to kind of sound out any questions that people have relevant at this stage so that we don't miss it. You have to unmute, Bridge.
There's some very interesting and very relevant questions. And before I come to question, there's an interesting comment by Sharifa. And it simply says that grounded pragmatism should help us resolve paradoxes.
Okay.
Thank you for that. That's a great comment. And some of the questions are, one of the paradigms we have held in HR is that don't hire overqualified people because they'll be demotivated from day one. So when you underhire in the sense that somebody who's 70–80%, then what is the role of the leader, his or her leader, to bring him or her up to 100% as fast as possible? Because you have done some underhiring by design so that people look up to it and motivate. So that's one question. I'd like that to be answered by any of the panel members. Then there are a couple of questions I'll combine and ask.
So a little bit around the role of the immediate manager, whoever that is, in supporting the transition in any which way.
Particularly when you haven't, the person incumbent is not 100% ready.
Right. Anyone wants to take a shot at that first straight away?
No, I'll take a shot at it. I think this is absolutely crucial point that Bridge asked, and I know Vijay has asked a similar question as well. I think the role of the line manager is super critical. I think more and more, I think the best HR manager will have to be deemed as the line manager. The line manager is the closest to action and owns the delivery of the effectiveness of somebody beyond the person himself or herself. Core ownership is the person who joins. Then the line manager is closest to action in my view. And I think the line manager partnership is not a supervisor, is really a partner at that moment to say, we brought you in with an aspiration. A fit can be deemed 70%, 80%, depending on which company talks about these percentages. We talk about 70% readiness, give the keys to somebody. Interviews or internal processes can only give you that much of indication of potential. And the word potential is ultimately what you hire for. If that is true, you're never going to get the full picture of the person in action till the person is in action. And therefore, you by definition have to lean on a group of, lean on context or lean on a group of people to help the person succeed. One is the person himself, second is the line manager. And we find that the line manager, if he's sensitive to the process of settling down, plays a better role in the person settling in quickly. Some of it comes naturally. Therefore, how do I balance my demand of the new employee to deliver in the new role versus helping the person settle? How do I play the role of a trainer, coach, guide in the role for the newcomer? Till what time? How do I guide the newcomer around ensuring that he carries or she carries the richness of his or her experience, which is what you hired the person for, particularly at senior exec levels, and yet bring that freshness into thinking, guardianing the cultural kind of nuances to get into, and what is acceptable, what are patterns which we are used to. And I think these are roles of the line manager, which is intimately to be played. And I think the role kicks in before the person joins, onwards to the person joins and thereafter. I think the transition process, therefore, has multiple players. And the transition coach for me plays a role of supporting, highlighting, bouncing board, being available, being a little bit of a firm guardian also of all entities involved in the transition. And I think just as a catalyst works in the process but is not part of the process, I think the transition coach plays that role, while the component A plus B equal to C plus D is a line manager there. You can't take the line manager out of that and substitute with the catalyst. You need to have the ingredients there. I find the line manager a super critical role. And the catalyst is still needed. Otherwise, the A plus B doesn't become C plus D sometimes. But that's my experience, Ganesh, or some of these roles people play.
Right. Great. I'm going to come back to the role of the transition coach, but just to complete what Oscar started as the sources of pressure for a transitioning leader. If we can quickly do a rapid fire of listing what, according to you, are the 2, 3, 4, 5 other things that are sources of pressure. So Oscar put down one as relationships as being critical, right? Ashok spoke about that internal anxiety as one thing. What are the other 3, 4 quick sources of pressure that we can list and put on the table before we move on?
So if I may to go on that, Ganesh, I would say just to build on a couple of points. One is my self-awareness, right? That's an important lever. The other one is, Ashok touched on it, my ability to unlearn and learn. Those are 2 massive pressure points.
All right. Okay. Ashok?
I think the pressure goes up if clarity is lacking. I take off from Vijesh, who's mentioned that, and Vijesh, you're absolutely right. I think if I join, there is uncertainty which is anyway built into any change. Okay, that's given, whether it's internal or external. More when somebody joins externally, okay, clearly. But it manifests substantially higher when there is lack of clarity as to, I thought you told me this while hiring me, and I'm now experiencing this. And then if the answer from our HR colleagues is, don't worry, it'll all iron out, it'll all be fine, don't worry, you have only heightened my worry. Okay, so role clarity, clarity of communication, clarity of networks, clarity of expectations, even for senior levels where we expect management of ambiguity to be one of the expertise or competences to have, even they are eligible for fair clarity on what am I joining you for? What's the mandate? So what's the mandate? If it is not clear, adds to exponential worry, saying how I made the right decision in moving. And is the transition made unnecessarily more complex by people celebrating ambiguity of definition? Yeah, and there is sometimes HR people have this joy of generally defining things broadly and say life is, so how do you call it? Broadness and lack of clarity doesn't make it more strategic. You need to, you can't just say, give some broad goalie and say, this is, don't worry, life will all be fine. We are big, think the big picture. Yeah, but listen, you hired me for something. What are the big picture deliverables? I think everybody's eligible for the clarity. And transition is messed without that clarity.
So I want to ask a question. Board managed companies have a nomination remuneration committee, which is supposed to oversee executive level appointments and moves. Are they seized of this issue of saying, okay, one is to approve the hire? Are they seized of this journey in the first 6-8 months? What is the sense you have at the risk of generalization? Are NRCs seized of the criticality of supporting transition, monitoring how it's going? What's your sense? Oscar?
Okay, I want to come at it from a slightly different angle. Yes, there is a growing consciousness towards providing support to senior executives as they transition into new roles. But more often than not, what I'm seeing from my limited experience is the fact that very often the initial stages are ignored, either because of the need is not seen, or the person himself or herself believes there is no need for it. And over time, some of these transition challenges begin to emerge as make the person more effective in his existing role kind of challenges, or development challenges, or the person needs to be developed in these particular areas. And when you go back and figure out, but this was maybe probably not so earlier because you didn't hire him for that, or he was very good in his previous role, you begin to find that because the transition didn't move the way it should have moved, and there's no right way of doing it, there's no foolproof method, you begin to feel that this transition requirement begins to morph into some other developmental
Right.
And if the sponsor, and Ashok touched upon it, if the sponsor or the line manager is not sensitive to it, or is, I would go to the other extent of saying is insensitive to it, it can have a tremendously catastrophic effect, and it can really dent the confidence of someone who's in that role. And then out of that may emerge the need for help. And that help is actually transition coaching delayed, but help nevertheless, So I would say that could be maybe another item to put on the table to spot the need quickly and provide that right kind of support quickly. Sometimes it happens when peers get promoted and people assume that, yeah, he was the senior most guy anyway, he was first among equals, he knows the place, and now he's got promoted. Everyone will accept him, and maybe the promoter feels that way, the direct line boss feels that way, but may not be so. And that is something which sometimes needs to get addressed because there could be subtle forms of internal sabotage or feet dragging and so on. So I would put that down also as something, and I would put this all under the category of understanding the story behind the story, understanding what lies beneath that obvious reality of what is there right now in front of you.
Fabulous points. Ganesh, just to add to what Oscar said, I think some fabulous points is made there. And I think those are very subtle factors which work below line. My experience of NRCs is NRCs are expecting assurances. They are saying that when we take a call on people and they're wanting to meet more people.
Mhm.
So it's no more a validation that management has taken a call and you go with the CXO hunt. They want to know on the basis of which you're hiring, why do you think this person will succeed? What are the risks you carry? How are you helping the person succeed? Because NRCs are very conscious now that the how do you call it? The need to succeed in the hands of the person you're hiring is very high. Because by the time the person doesn't succeed and you replace, change, etc., it's an enormous loss and cost to the company. And I think the NRCs are starting to play a sharper role about asking for accountability and telling us, why do you think this person will succeed? So it's no more that you did a brave act of hiring somebody and onboarding and getting approval of the NRC. They're saying, how do you believe this person will succeed? And that is transiting into detailed conversations around what Oscar said, around competencies, around capabilities, around predicting success. Under what context do you think he will succeed? What are the enablers? Two of the directors asked me saying, Ashok, what do you think are the enablers that you're going to establish to help this person succeed?
Right.
So therefore, in that question is hidden the question of you better make the transition successful.
Right.
So your job doesn't end at the time of hiring and appointing, but tell me how you're going to help me succeed. And of course, not taking away the onus on the person. But I think the sharpness of results is coming into the success of the newcomer. I think that I see as a perceptible pushy shift which is happening. It's CXOs are mirroring that.
Right.
At least, from our experience, this is a real life situation, right? Thierry, our CEO, he joined us on 6th of July 2020. I was, of course, in Wipro Limited, then the IT services division of the company. And 6th of July 2020 was right in the middle of COVID. So a CEO joining in, based out of France, no travel, never met anybody. Most of us are Indians, culturally very, very different the way we think, eat, talk, name it. I can safely say that the personal interest that Rishad, the chairman of the company, took just to ensure that Thierry understands what Wipro is all about, what work style works, what are the changes expected from Thierry, where he should be driving certain things so that it gives the right results for the company, because he's just not coming into continues the steady state, but make changes, deliver results. And it was being done while we did not call it as executive transition, putting a PPT around it. It was designed extremely thoughtfully into breaking it up into smaller parts in terms of a conversation with customers, especially who have been with us for more than 10 plus years, to understand what do they like about Wipro and what should change. Conversation with customers we have lost. Conversation with employees, including Rishad contributing, hey, this is my point of view and your point of view could be different. Right? But in my view, Rishad was actually playing the role of a manager, though as a chairman of the board, but actually helping Thierry understand the organization. What it's for, at the same point in time, setting expectations in his own way in terms of from a future perspective.
Excellent.
And that once that happens for the first 3 or 4 months, then it's Thierry's vision finally at the end of the day to really scale the organization now. Right.
Superb.
And then regular updates used to go, because he obviously was the chairman of the company, updates automatically used to go to the board. In fact, we have now a process as part of our talent review and planning process within the company, where for every newcomer who is in the company for 6 months or less, we have a dedicated set of sections where we talk about what are our initial impressions on them. So typically you end up having a point of view on leaders after they spend 1 year, you've done an appraisal, etc., right? So we can, hey, first 6 months, what has worked? Has the person settled in? What are early signs, right? And then kind of giving those feedback back to that individual. So we have kind of put in that process to drive home some of these changes.
Excellent. So wonderful, really. Thanks for sharing. And I think clearly what we are saying, however senior the boss is, this is number one priority. It cannot be delegated. While you can get a coach to support, this is the job of the boss. I think that's a fabulous takeaway for all of us right here in terms of the importance of the immediate manager to see it through successfully, having done what you've done. We also spoke about the sources of transition pressure, right? Ashok, I'd like to invite you because 6 months is actually, in fact, in CFI's reckoning, the period until which we call anything transition. If after 6 months of joining someone come to us, we say now it's no longer transition because the company is saying the runway is over, right? So you're absolutely right. 6 months is the period until which it is counted as transition. So Ashok, I know that Aditya Birla has really been a pioneer in actually championing transition and making it a business critical priority. And it will be very useful for you to spend a couple of minutes giving a flavor to all the people present here about how ABG looked at transition and transition coaching as such an important thing.
So I think this topic, I think our talent and learning teams have gripped very strongly and built very strong patterns for this purpose. I think it starts with building. We started early, few years back, talking about building belief. Why are we doing this? Is it just another form of coaching? And you go to somebody who's new with saying, we are happy to give you a coach. The first thing is, what's wrong with me? I'm fine. I'm already successful. I know what to do. So leave me alone. Just empower me and I'll do everything else. I will get there. So it started with a bit of belief building journey and the enormity of all that we spoke so far, saying that we are here to help you succeed. So the core belief of our transition coaching process called Make Your Mark, which is how my learning team, Ajay Soni and team have labeled it nicely, is to say, we are here to help you succeed. We are here to help you make your mark. So it is not given coaching. We want to give you coaching. We believe in coaching alone. No. It's to help you succeed. So customer at the center, the new person at the center became the core. Having done that, we find that many of our newcomers, and we've had about nearly, if I take transition coaching as different from the executive coaching part, we've had nearly, I would say, 50 plus transition coaching assignments done and about 30 odd executive coaches done. And in a way, it's kind of overlaps a little bit, but I will segregate it for consciously when somebody is transiting a big role, somebody is new to a role, etc. And over time, we believe that when well invested and the newcomer has a quality conversation because he's here or she's here to succeed, they want velocity. They want to do quickly. And if I can get the partnership done with the line manager, that A plus B, if I get the employee and the line manager sorted and give them then at the right time catalyst at the right temperature, which means the quality of the coach, the match of the coach is very important, then I'm setting up for a successful C plus D. I think this was broadly how we are approaching it. And across our 50 leaders, and many of them are very senior leaders, board position leaders, CXOs, MDs, functional heads who joined us from other businesses, other companies who joined us. As I said, how do you transfer the confidence of the interviewee to the uncertainty of the newcomer to the confident, successful professional that you originally hired for? And I think the transition coach has played a big role there in helping people succeed. So much so that today it's part of the way we work. The moment we hire a newcomer, pretty much it's part of our induction process to say, at what time do we trigger the transition coach? The first conversation is with the HR head of the business, along with the line manager, who introduces this topic to the newcomer. Only this morning, I got a mail from one of our newcomers who joined us 33 days back to say, we spoke about this earlier. It's about a month since I've joined. Can we trigger a transition coach process for me, please? Now that for me is a win in terms of confidence in the process. which is a gentle offer on the table. So I don't force a coach down your throat. You must want it. And I think people are starting to say, if this will help me succeed, it will help me. And the coach, equally, I find that our transition coaches, many of you who've been our transition coaches, and thank you for doing a fantastic job on that. I really mean that from the heart, have helped evoke that quality in my line managers, importantly. I mean, I need my line manager to play his or her role in helping somebody succeed. And I will hold them down and accountable for that role that they have to play. And therefore, the coach quite often is my guardian. The transition coach is the quiet guardian of what works and what doesn't work. He's not informing me. It's a sacred relationship. We don't interfere between the coach and the coachee. But he prods the line manager to do the right thing as much as the coach guides the newcomer to do that. And I find that very senior CEOs, and the person I referred to, this 33-day person, is the CEO we've hired from another group for one of our very significant roles, and that's in transition. And 33 days later, he's reached out. I left this kind of ticket with him to call back when you want to. And knowing that 45 days later, I would have called him if he hadn't called me. But 33 days later, he has already called me to say, can I chat with you? When do we trigger this process for me? Is there a timeline? Great. So I think we have buy-in. And I think if managed sensitively, it leads to fantastic success. And I just want to add last point here, experience on this journey, Ganesh. This is not a process. If it lacks authenticity, it will fail. This is a very odd, how do I measure authenticity? You know, if therefore the intent of the coach, if I intend the coach, if I don't honor the sacredness of the coachee-coach relationship, as an organization, it will fail. If the line manager doesn't give it seriousness, it will fail. And if the coach takes it at seriousness, I think there is that. So there is authenticity as an air cover for this process. And honestly, many of our people are doing fantastically well. As I said, the bravery is not in the hiring part. The bravery is actually moved to the settling down and success part. I think that's where transition coach for us has really worked well. And full credit to my talent team for building in it and believing in it, I must say. They've held ground.
Great. Very nice. Very well put, Ashok. And that's fantastic. Ashok, Oscar, if you can take a minute or two to really say the highlights of transition coaching. When you work with someone on transition, what does an engagement look like?
Okay. I think one of the most important things in the engagement really starts if I'm assuming for a moment now that we've that the transition coaching has got triggered at the right time, example that Ashok gave, and the line manager is somewhat on board. He doesn't have to be fully on board, but he's largely on board. Then I think the important thing starts with the first conversation with the coachee in terms of what is he wanting to get out of this relationship? Where is the discomfort coming from? Or where is the area that he wants help in? Or where does he want support? Or does he say, I don't know this particular area very well. I don't know what. So he tries to spec out, and maybe by going with him over a couple of questions to find out really where is he looking for help and what is the kind of help that he's looking for. And can coaching provide that help? So if coaching can provide that help, then that's where I come in. Where is the role of the sponsor in providing that help? I haven't met the sponsor as yet to start with. The next step is to meet the sponsor and to take his perspective of what is coming from. And more often than not, people, very rarely do I get somebody telling me that he doesn't understand his business objectives or his business priorities because he's good at it. That's why you hired him. It's always, I want him to quickly settle down. And the quickly settle down, if you begin to dissect and unpack, it is about how quickly can he build relationships with his with his team? How quickly can he build relationships with the board if he's into that position? How quickly can he build relationships across corporate, particularly for things that he wants to do? And very often new CEOs would want to do initiatives. And if the organization is large and if it is structured, then it's not easy to just break out and do your own thing. You've got to carry people along. So how quickly can he do that? And that seems to be the first kind of agenda item which comes in. The second kind of agenda item is what I call highlighting the difference. And the sponsor says, this is what's different here, which he may not have faced in his earlier company. I wonder if he's aware of it. I wonder if he realizes how important that is. So you kind of highlight the difference. And really, that's the start. And so taking from both these two, and then of course culminating in the three-way meeting, and then starting forward on the road to transition is what we look like. Now, since time is short, and since the runway is short in a transition kind of coaching, all this has to be done very, very quickly. So availability of coaching, availability of sponsors' time, availability of having the quick three-way meeting after that, and availability of the coach being able to kick off immediately after that, in my view, is super critical. Super critical.
Great. Bridge, time again for questions, and maybe some good questions you want to allow whoever is asking to ask the question. You're muted.
You're on mute, Bridge.
So I'll just summarize a couple of comments, couple of questions, and then we would invite people to ask those questions. So one comment which came out was that if the succession planning has included preparation for the incumbent, then the transition should be smooth. That's a comment which indicates importance of preparation as a part of succession planning. Another comment is that if there is a clarity of demands on the new incumbent, both at personal level of his or her development and organizational level, then transition can be easier. And that clarity can be a great enabler. A couple of questions are combined is, what factors should a new incumbent consider in prioritizing demands of transition? And therefore, what is the importance of early wins? I was planning to direct that question to Oscar.
Okay.
I'll repeat the question. What factors should a new incumbent consider in prioritizing demands of transition and therefore importance of early wins?
Yeah. So I'll come back to what I said at the start and maybe try to go into a little more detail. One is understanding yourself in terms of where you fit into this new engagement, because the playing field is different. The pitch conditions you may be a great batsman, but the pitch conditions are different. So understanding where you fit in and what is the work that I need to do on myself. And the other is, what's the work that I need to do on understanding some of the criticalities of this position that I have just taken. And what I have found over time, what seems to work is how do I quickly, and I use the word settle in for want of a better term, but understanding the ground reality, understanding the people you work with, forging relationships with the people you work with, building and going out of your comfort zone to make the relationships. Very often you need to go out of your comfort zone to make the relationship, and the relationship doesn't happen. And sometimes people think that in the process of meetings, in the process of interaction, the relationship will happen. I think new entrants have to go out of the way to make that relationship happen. I have never found understanding of the business to be at the top of the list, because most of these people are critical. Very rarely is understanding of the business or understanding of numbers at the top of the list. It's about the softer issues and dealing with the softer issues of how I settle in. And these would be the things that I would work on initially, along with what do I need to do to work on myself, make myself more effective and calm and handle those issues of pressure that could come up from time to time.
Let me ask Ayush Khan that question. Ayush, what would you see as early wins to say this guy has settled down?
I think team connect. We definitely see that as an initial dynamics that's at play to see how well is this person getting welcomed by the team and how is this really person connecting with the team, because that's a very, very important lever. The second thing that we look for is how are customers relating to this individual.
Mhm.
right? Again, just one-on-one, we're not talking about closing a specific deal with a client, but what's the typical connection with the client, right? Because typically if you're connected with clients, a lot of software aspects we talked about earlier, right? Authenticity, depth, knowledge, all those things would kind of, be at play there. And the third thing which we definitely look for is any initial ideas that the person brings to the table, which is something we haven't thought about, right? Because especially when you're going out to the market to hire, there is the underlying point of things should be done differently, though it's not stated as explicitly, right? So is this person really bringing in new ideas which are interesting or can be implementable? Now, the side to it is people always come up with interesting ideas, but the initial chemistry gets built depending on how the person is presenting those ideas. Right? Typically, if I just come in and say this is not working here, this is how it should be done, it doesn't connect really well. If, for example, you start by saying, "Hey, I really like this, but have you thought of this? Have you explored this idea?" So those are landing statements, right? And that kind of really helps a person know, what, the person has the right intent. He wants to make change and he wants to carry people along with him or her through this journey. So those are three important things that we look for to see, yeah, this leader is settling in well and will have a longer runway in the scheme of things.
So I'm picking up something interesting, and I want to present this hypothesis here to the three of you. While when we hire the person, it looks like we want some hard numbers and wins and so on and so forth. The signs that seem to settle the sponsors down is the fit and the acceptance of the softer human dimension. It's very paradoxical that we are actually looking for something, but what calms us down is the fact that the human side is first taken care of, the relationship. Ashok, do you agree with that hypothesis?
Yeah, clearly, I think that's a paradox which manifests itself clearly. And I think when the person joins, what is manifested is not his past life and results or the numbers. What is manifest is what Ayushkant said, which is the person. And quite often, the person's ability to settle in is a function of attitudes, mindsets, leadership style, choices of language that you use to articulate your thoughts. How lightly do you carry your glorious history? And we keep telling people that you've been recruited for all that you can do and all that you come from, but carry your seniority and carry your glory lightly. It helps form better relationships. And so how well do you manage the soft part of settling in? How well do you navigate your early ideas? Because when you were joining, people said, we want you to come in with fresh thoughts, and we have a culture which encourages open thinking and freshness, and everybody says that. Okay, only to come in and say, don't be in a hurry, take time, be slow. We are along, it takes all, settle down. And then it goes on and on. And the guy says, listen, I'm in a hurry. I know what to do. Leave me. So how do you bridge this settling down process of relationship becomes super critical. I think that is manifest first. If you get that right, then the actual, what is called the business acumen and the rest of the hard competencies, the playground for that is built. And you've got to prepare the bed to put the seed in. If you straight away dump the seed and expect it to grow without that test bed getting ready, I find that part is super critical. And needs that involvement.
Great.
That clarity, as Oscar said, becomes critical. Clarity, structured thinking. And I actually have come to the conclusion, Ganesh, over time, that it is not a casual process. You got to have some structure in the thinking. You can't simply say you come and generally walk into the system and become successful. Yeah, surely that can happen occasionally. But I think it is now coming to the conclusion that you need to, and this is gray hair speaking, that you need a little bit of structure, a little bit of planning, a little bit of helpfulness to land there. I think it's a big ingredient.
Right. Absolutely. And the more emotionally intelligent, prepared, mature, aware the person is, the easier it is. And if he isn't, all is not lost if he has someone to rely on who can remind him about what will trip him.
Yeah.
Right? Bridge, anyone you want to ask a question?
I want to invite 3-4 people.
Please.
First is Pushpendra Singh. He had an interesting question. So Pushpendra, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Bridge. This question is actually about the coaching that I have been doing, where I find the transitions actually not succeeded. One was internal promotee, the other case was a brilliant guy brought from outside, both the cases. And they've almost continued for more than a year, almost 2 years during COVID times. And then the coach is brought in, okay. So we treat it as executive coaching, but I see it's like a stage of transition coaching, getting into executive coaching. In one case, it was about performance. In the other case, it is about the adapting to the culture, where it's more people-centric and the person is more performance-driven.
Right.
So, and it's a virtual environment. So really a big challenge to work in. So any comments on that, how to handle it and what do you do about it?
Well,
Let me play the role of the moderator suddenly here and say, Ganesh, why did you take that question? Because Ganesh has seen many such cases, I'm sure. And let me switch it around and say, Ganesh, let me draw you in now. Over to you, Ganesh.
No, I think quite often I speak to a lot of clients who come to us and for help. And the COVID is, Pushpendra, a very odd time. It's a very, what you say, black swan situation to judge anything. Because like Ayushkan spoke, I've seen so many CEOs who hadn't met their team, who hadn't walked into their workplace, didn't have a smell of the place, and so on and so forth. So I think, but the point is, if transition, as Ashok said, is neglected, or we assume it will happen and it doesn't happen, it is likely to be seen as performance failure. And it is too late, especially at a senior level, it is too late. And organizations find it very hard to take a decision about it because the consequences of taking a decision are very serious, because it can tell badly on the managing director, on the board. They cannot accept and say, yeah, we failed. So it's between the devil and the deep blue sea. On the other hand, there might be some collateral damage which is already down on the floor because of poor transition. Maybe there is attrition, maybe some seniors want to leave. So it can be very messy. And at that time, to bring in a coach is to set the coach up also for a failure. So it's difficult and time is running out. And then it can almost say that, look, we tried everything, including coaching, and it didn't work. And that is when organizations are willing to give up. And at that level of stress, I must admit, it's very difficult for anyone to change. I can't change when there is so much stress stacked up on top of me. I think there are limits to what coaching can do at that stage. That's what I would say. Yeah, Bridge, back to you.
Next, I would like to invite is Naina Raj, another interesting question. So, Naina Raj, can you please unmute yourself? Or I can read the question. How do we coach the newcomer when he sees a picture?
Yeah, he's now unmuted. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. What happens is at the time of interview, the CEO perceives as the need of the organization something, and based on his perception, he hires a person whom he believes has got that skill, knowledge, and experience, everything. But after the incumbent coming in, when he settles down, realizes that in his perception, the requirement is something else which is good for the organization and which will give more results than the expectations of the CEO. And if there is a big gap and the individual comes to me and asks me as a coach, so how do I handle my CEO? Because he is still blinking through a blinkers actually like a horse, whereas I see a bigger picture where I feel the needs are different and that will give better organization results. So how do you help me? That is the question which comes to me
Right,
actually.
right.
So can you throw some light on how did we go about?
So Oscar, to add, give the question a twist, how much of your time is spent in coaching the person to deal with his boss?
I would say ever since before joining itself, he consulted me whether this is the expectation, this is my experience, and can I take up the assignment? But as he presented, the expectation of the CEO, the match with his past, everything was perfect. And then he took a decision to join. So from then I am involved actually. And after 3 months or 4 months of trying to settle down, he realizes there's a pressure on him to give results, whereas the I would say the honeymoon period is last and he is expected to deliver. At that stage, he realizes there's a big gap actually. And whenever he is trying to influence the CEO that this is the need, the CEO is not able to appreciate much because his mind is set.
Correct.
There's a gap, and how do we?
Sure. So Oscar, the question is how much of conversations around managing the boss?
That is one area where he is asking.
Oscar will ask.
Yeah. So I think that's an important area. So when I do my first conversation with the person and you start to talk about where are the prickly spots or where are the spots which are not really working for you in the way that you want to work it, this sometimes comes up, and says, listen, I haven't understood my boss, or I try to do something, can't do it, or I don't have control, or my boss doesn't give me control, or my boss still thinks I'm new and talks to the people below me. So there are a number of such examples which come up when you have a detailed conversation with the guy. So I tend to flip that question around by saying, what is it that you need to do or you think will give your boss the confidence that ... and so on. So if that is something that the coachee believes that is in his court, then we have something to work upon.
Right.
If the coachee believes that there is nothing in his court and this guy is just not willing to give up, then I think we have a really difficult case on our hands. And then I sometimes get to talk to the boss and say that, would it help if ... and then start to open that up as different from saying he is complaining about this, and I would have a conversation about what if we did this, and would you be able to support him in the following ways ... and is it possible for... So I try to rope the boss in as a co-collaborator and try to make him a part of the process. There are differing degrees of success. It largely depends on the boss. It largely depends on what kind of chemistry has already got built. And sometimes the onus is on the coachee to actually go out of his way and go out the extra mile to further enhance that chemistry. But those are typically the kinds of methods that I would use. But it's an important part because I think the biggest source of support in any organization comes from the boss. And so whether that boss is the promoter, or whether he is the MD, or whether he's the executive vice president or CXO, if you feel that that person is behind you, he's got your back, I think that gives you the ability to do a number of things, to take a number of obstacles in your stride, to deal with a couple of really difficult things, and maybe look inwards and say, hey, I need to work on this. I need to do this. I need to, do that, and so on. So that's where I would start from and really go forward.
Right. Absolutely.
Ganesh, if I can also invite Vijay Rao, he has multiple questions. He can combine some of these.
Yeah. Hi, Vijay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Fascinating, I think, session. The questions, two questions basically. One is to say that in large organizations, like for example, Wipro would have a CEO who's coming from overseas, right? Similarly, Aditya Birla Group and many other large groups today hire all different nationalities from different parts of the world. So there are several transitions. It's not about the role, it's in the role itself.
Right.
Or how do these large organizations help in multiple transitions? Is there a mechanism of some sense? I'm not saying formally, multiple coaches for different aspects of that, or is it one person holding it, saying
Right,
get together kind of stuff?
right. Ashkant, you want to?
Yeah, so at least from our perspective, I'm sorry, the bar just went off, so I'm trying to figure out what happened here. Yeah, so when we are looking at transition, we look at multiple focus areas, and which goes beyond just the coaching part of it, right? So the 3 or 4 things that we definitely do. One is for every senior leader. When I'm talking about senior leader, I'm talking about direct report of a CEO. By design, we appoint a buddy, and the buddy is typically a peer of this individual. More to kind of this person who is a buddy typically would have had a slightly longer tenure with Wipro, right? That conversation ensures that this person understands what Wipro is all about. And by design, we have a process where the CEO checks with both of them once in 2 months, understanding how things are going from process perspective. So that ensure people understand that it is a serious stuff, and people just can't get out saying, I didn't have time for this conversation. That's point number 1. Point number 2, which we do very formally, is we have a process called as a new manager assimilation, NMA, which is based on the principle of Johari window, where we get all the direct reports of the leader into one room. We spend 4 hours of facilitation, where we try and understand from the team's view, after the person has spent a month in the job, what is the person doing well, where can the person improve, what would like to know more about this person, so on and so forth. And then we share that with the leader. So that ensures that the team and the leader get to know each other better. That's point number 2. Point number 3 that we do is as part of the formal talent review process itself, where we do a stock take on how that leader has performed, not performed in terms of financial results, but more in terms of assimilating into the organization in the first 6 months. Right? So for us, it is more the framework of assimilation, and coaching is a sub-element to it. So because depending on what's required, at times we go in for executive coaching, transition coaching, or at times we get the manager, the primary manager, much more accountable to be part of this whole process much more strongly. So for us, the theme is more assimilation, is how we kind of fundamentally try and make it work.
Right. Excellent. So,
Ganesh, one more question, if you permit me.
okay.
I'm going to invite Shekhar VS. Interesting perspective he's bringing. Shekhar, can I request you to unmute?
Yeah, thanks for this. This comes from my lever experience, where whether you are good or bad, every 2 years you move to a new role. And generally, the handing over and taking over, what is the relevance of this process in a transition? Sometimes we are told that even if you are in a travel outstation, you are expected to take a new role without somebody being there to hand over. So like readiness for anytime audit, the new manager is expected to take over a new role without anyone to hand over. So my question is how coaching can help in anytime transition. Is there a requirement for a documentation of any process, or without any documentation, the takeover can take place?
Another complication can be when there is nobody to hand over.
Very real complication.
Yeah. Anyone wants to say anything? Yeah.
So I'll take a shot at that. I think that these are real situations. So where internally movements happen all the time, and you encourage people to move, take on new roles. And sometimes, as Brij says, the situation encourages the role in itself. And therefore you go in and take charge, that you double hat sometimes, as they say. And these are normal phenomenon which is happening. I think we have tried to instill a practice of a very formal HOTO process, a handover takeover process. Where that is not possible, we've got the current teams to sit together to put out the clarity for the new incumbent. The line manager of that role, which this person is taking on, has to play a very crucial role. So if every 2 to 3 years there is role change, it's not that every 2 to 3 years there is a transition coaching involved.
Sure.
But there is elements of the coaching process are instituted into the what Ayush Khan correctly said as the assimilation process, starts with clarity, starts with what your mandate is, and starts with when you take charge of the situation, not of the role or results. When you take charge of the situation, what are the assimilation points? And is that baked into the HOTO process? Is the line manager of the role and is the team below cognizant of the change you have been foisted into, either structurally correctly or otherwise as well. And I think if we envision that as an opportunity to make a difference, people go in with a positive tone and mind. We are very conscious at that moment of painting a, how do you call it, a very structured picture for the incumbent going in, including of possible aspirants for that role from within that team. So you're a little bit of an outsider from within the company, presumably, but being parachuted into a situation. But remember, there are people below that role, which you're taking charge, already there, having aspirations. Some of it might be overlapped with the role that you're now taking charge. And he said, why is this guy coming from another business or unit or a function while I'm here and I'm capable of taking on this? So managing aspirations with proper communication and sensitivity seems to be another ingredient to help this new incumbent settle down.
Right.
And therefore, transition management comes in with a little more complex thing than deployment into managing the team below, right communication. And I think HR has a role to play there. The line manager has a role to play there. And that helps the newcomer who's parachuted in settle better. So that's been our journey.
So the last question, and you can have a quick shot at it. What is the one thing you would say as a signal to say the person has actually transitioned? Ayushkant, you want to take a shot at it first?
Oh, that's a tough one, Ganesh. I haven't really thought about it from that lens. But yeah, at the end of the day, if I just look at it finally for the outcome the person has been hired for, right? Better business results,
right,
than what was happening in the past. And that kind of keeps into account everything that's happening, all the complexities that are there.
Right.
But yeah, for me, that's the final moment of truth at the end of the day. So.
All right. Oscar, what did it be?
Yeah, for me, the moment of truth comes from 2 points. One is, how does the person himself feel at the end of a particular period, depending on what we've decided? Does he say, yeah, this is home. I've reached here. I am comfortable. Yeah, it's different from my old company, but this is fine. This has got some great parts. You know, he begins to feel that this is home. He's comfortable, and not in just the words that he says, but it's coming from within.
Right.
B, how does his boss feel?
Right.
And is his boss say, yes, he's settled down, he knows what's happening now, I'm quite happy with the way it's gone, and so on? Or is he saying no progress, or it's somewhere in the middle? Then, you know, you can feed that back. And I tend to, if possible, talk to 1 or 2 of his close peers with permission to say, so how do you think he's settling in? And the guy says, yeah, I think he's fine. Or he'll say, oh, you know, he's okay, but, you know, he should not talk about his past company. You know, they'll come up with something like this, which is very specific. And normally as a coach, we like to work with specific things. So they'll come up with some specific things. And the answers to that tells me whether he's settled in. But the first one is to go back to the coachee himself and say what it's like. You know, that's number 1. Sponsor number 2, and maybe a pair, 1 or 2 close peers to say, hey, what's happening? This is over and above, you know, the post 360 and all that sort of dipstick, etc. But this is a more focused conversation that one would have to find out if the person has actually settled in.
What's it for you, Ashok? One thing.
I'll add on to what Ayushkant and Oscar have already said. I think it's one is the business results and how the person feels, as Bridge has correctly said. It's also the feedback from employees and peer groups. Which come in. So we do a 360 at the right time, gives feedback back. Quite often a transition coach does that feedback process for the person as an independent source of validation. And quite often the newcomer is very grateful for that validation. And it doesn't mean he has to be a popular person, but the person is smelt out. Reputation and authenticity is a smell. And I think that becomes quite candid, and that feedback helps the person flower. So I think that's a sign of settling down. When you have the confidence to take a stance differently, when you have the confidence to present a different approach and it's accepted, you know
Excellent.
you've settled in as much as results are coming in and so on. I think
Excellent.
it's a lovely ending to a process.
Great. That sounds fantastic. Like Oscar said, the person says, I'm feeling like home. I feel good. And there are numbers to show. And the team is happy. So it's really, what I feel good about is it's really about respecting the human side of the organization.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what all of us here as coaches are here to do. And it's been fantastic having you all, Ayushkant, Ashok, Oscar, to have this fascinating 90-minute conversation. So I thank you all for being here. Truly appreciate it. Bridge, I sprung this on you. Thanks for doing what you did, which is a difficult job to extract some stuff from the chat. I thank Suresh and Prakash for helping all of us come together for this last event in our calendar for this year. And of course, all our wonderful coaches, our clients, and everyone who joined here. I'm sure you enjoyed it. Happy Holi, and see you all in person very soon in your respective cities. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks. Lovely.
Thank you, Ganesh and team. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. And Sangeeta, of course. Sangeeta, you want to bring us to the...
Yes, I'm just doing that. Just a
Ayushkant
minute.
has maybe only a couple of minutes, but maybe we'll just say bye-bye to him before he drops off. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.